Hello, everybody. My name is Mordechai Blasting. 10K Batay Yisroel is an organization that is very dear to my heart. I know many of the volunteers, and they're never looking for credit. They're never looking for their name to be mentioned anywhere. It's just l'shem shamayim, just to help someone else. One of the themes behind the formation of 10K Batay Yisroel is that every Shidduch suggestion counts. Anyone that has tried to read a Shidduch knows that the process is challenging. And sometimes we think we're spinning our wheels and we're getting nowhere. Baruch Hashem, I had the schus of making many Shidduchim. Kadosh Baruch Hu has allowed me to be the shliach. And sometimes people come over to me, I only made one Shidduch. And I say, one Shidduch? You made one Shidduch? That's incredible. That's more than most of the world. Wow, you got someone to go out on a date? You're doing an act of Hashem. Hashem is busy a third of his day, spending his day being Meshadech Shidduchim. And that's what you're busy with? I have to stand up for you. We can't underestimate the accomplishments. It is with this in mind that 10K started this series of gaining strength with every Shidduch suggestion. We hope that you leave with a feeling of renewed purpose and strength with every bit of hishtadlus. Anyway, you guys didn't come to hear me. You came to hear renowned speaker. I would like to introduce business executive, author, and prolific speaker, Mr. Charlie Harary. Charlie Harary, aside from being the CEO of Avon Point Group, Charlie is the author of the best-selling book, Unlocking Greatness. His podcasts, videos, and radio show have reached hundreds of thousands of people worldwide, providing priceless messages regarding business, personal growth, and spirituality. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Charlie Harary. It is a real honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. It is my honor. Thank you for inviting me and this incredible organization, which I've been following since its inception. And really, it's a big zchus to be part of it. And thank you so much. I want to first thank those who have their videos on. I appreciate it. Doing a bunch of these and looking at lots of black boxes is wonderful. But and I know it's a big commitment, but if you have it on, it goes a long way to see human beings. So thank you so much. And I want to just share a couple of thoughts about Tisha B'Av, about where we're in right now, and why I think what you're doing may be the key to Geula. So just stick with me for a few minutes. Tisha B'Av doesn't make, if you really look at the story, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It feels almost as if we got punished unfairly. That was like my claim most of my youth. Thank God for my mom in principal's offices, but most of my upbringing was me trying to explain to authority, my principal, that I didn't do it. It wasn't fair. That's too harsh. That's too much. It feels very much that's what Tisha B'Av is, no? We just come out of Mitzrayim. We worshipped an Egel, Avodah Zarah, by Har Sinai. Like, that's pretty serious. The Gemara says it's compared, if you can almost imagine this, don't even imagine this imagery. It's so shocking. The Gemara says, Aluva Kala, Shazanta, Besoch Chupasa. Like a bride who is unfaithful under her own chuppah. That's what the Egel was. And for that, Kadosh Baruch Hu forgives us. Then we stand by the banks of Canaan. Hashem says, are you ready to go in? And they send in spies. We're not sending in military leaders, it was a rabbinic committee. Moshe Rabbeinu takes a bunch of rabbis, sends them into Israel, and says, by the way, look out for stuff. And they go into Israel, and they find the stuff they're supposed to look out for. Moshe goes to go check out the land. Well, guess what happened? The Medrash says that when they walked in, every single town that they went to was a funeral. Every town they walked in, someone died. They're like, what's going on here? They're like, well, this guy died. They go to the next town, the guy died. Every town they went to, the Medrash says, somebody died. And they're looking at each other like, holy cow, what's up with this place? Moshe says, look out to see if you see fortified cities. Back in those days, back in the old days, the way they protect themselves with these big walls around the city. And when you're fighting a war and you've got, sticks and stones and some swords, and you're going up against the city with a huge wall, it's not really a fight. So Moshe's like, go look out for walls. And they come back and they say, we see massive walls. There are cities with massive walls everywhere. Eretz Ocheles Yoshveh, everyone's dying. These are massive walled cities. Like, we have no shot. This is insane. And people started to cry. And Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you cried for this? You know the story, right? You'll cry forever. Does that seem fair? Does this seem fair to anybody here? A year beforehand, they're serving an idol and God's okay with it. And now they walk into a land, they're scared because they looked out for the things that Moshe told them to look out for, and God just can't seem to forgive them. What was so terrible that we got this big lead up and we got 3 weeks and the 9 days and the 25-hour super fast in the middle of the summer, and we're all sitting around so sad. And for what? Because we got a little scared over the things that we should have been scared about? What in the world is going on? Allow me to share with you a perspective. About a year and a half ago, if you remember, the world shut down last March. So a lot of what I do during my day is helping businesses grow, and you can imagine what life was like in March. The economy was, the whole world was in a downward spin. No one knew which way was up. Remember March, April, nobody knew. No one had an idea what was going on. Everything shut down. Companies, employees, what's going on with their businesses? And everything moved to Zoom. And I spent the first few weeks, literally just this issue and that issue, this company, that thing. And you're seeing people with businesses that were generational, that were collapsing. No one knew what to do. And you have to be strong and you have to give chizzuk. And there was one afternoon where I was talking to somebody and it really got to me. Like, there was no answers. No one knew when the economy would turn around. No one knew how they're going to support the people that they have on staff. The people that were on staff are all going home, so they can't go out and look for jobs. And there was no light in sight. So we get off this conference call. Now, back in the old days, like pre-March, when you finished a meeting, at least you had time to get up, leave the conference room, take the elevator to the street, and at least if you're in the city, walk wherever you got to walk to. But in the new world, in Zoom, that's not how it works. You click off Zoom and then you click on the next Zoom. There's no commute time. So you click off Zoom 1 and I get onto Zoom 2. And I'm on Zoom 2 and the person on the call is like ready to roll. And I'm still getting over Zoom 1. And he's like, you're okay? I'm like, I'm fine. Let's get started. He goes, you sure? I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay. He goes, you don't look okay. And meanwhile, there's like 6 people on Zoom. I'm like, I'm fine. Let's get going. What are we talking about? So the guy goes, everybody, let's give us 15 minutes. And all the black boxes disappear. And just me and him. He goes, what's going on? I'm like, nothing. He goes, you forgot about the seed? I said, what? He goes, you forgot about the seed. I'm like, yeah, I forgot about the seed. I don't even know what you're talking about. What seed? What are you saying? Goes, the seed. You forgot about the seed. I'm like, apparently I did, because I don't even know what you're talking about. And you mentioned it like 6 times. He goes, let's postpone the call. Go to your email and call me later. I'm like, let's do that. Get off the call. And I go to my email, and in my email is an email that I sent to him 2 years earlier. It was a photocopy of maybe my favorite sefer, my favorite Jewish book. I don't know what everyone's background is. I'll just translate, just for whoever you are, I'll just translate all Hebrew words. My favorite Jewish book. It's written by an author who is one of the most inspiring rabbis I've ever read. I'd never had a chance to meet him, but he changed my life. His name is the Nesivos Shalom. He comes from a Hasidic sect called Slanim. And he wrote a sefer, a book, when I was a young lad, just like using that word. I remember going to Israel, an uninspired teenager, and they gave me this book. And I'll never forget, this book literally changed. It gave me a taste of Judaism like I never thought possible. And in this book, the Nesivos Shalom speaks about a moment that takes place on Tisha B'Av. It is, to me, one of the greatest moments of the year. In fact, with God's help, hopefully we won't have a Tisha B'Av. I'm going to be hopefully by Ornava live. I'm so pumped to be live again. And I asked him, please let me, always, I asked him for this slot. Because of this book, because of this one mimer. I don't know how to translate mimer, entry, I guess. The Nesivos Shalom speaks about something that blew me away. He says there's a moment that takes place only once a year. It takes place on Tisha B'Av. If you remember, Tisha B'Av begins really at the lowest point. Right now, we're in the descent. We just passed by Rosh Chodesh. We're in the 9 days. Baruch Hashem, this year we don't have a Shavua Shechaba, which would make it even more intense. We go from there to Erev Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, we start on the floor. We're on the bottom. And we read a Megillah called Eicha, which is really a Megillah filled with pain. Being alone, darkness. We sit in a shul and we're supposed to make it darker. And even from the first second that Tisha B'Av hits, it hits us with a bang. And throughout the next day, what happens is we sit and say kinos, which is just more and more lamentations, until something magical happens. It's so subtle that most of us don't even realize it happens. In the middle of the day, all of a sudden people start standing up, especially if you go to shul or if you're in your house sitting on the floor. All of a sudden someone goes, what time is it? And they go, it's chatzos. Chatzos is midday. Everybody gets up and sits down. And like, you're still fasting and it's still exhausting. And there's only like, it feels like there's still 20 hours left of the fast. But at least you're sitting down like a mensch. You feel like a human being a little bit. Now, for most of us, that's like a random momentary pleasure that doesn't help much, because then you look at your watch and there's like 8 hours left and it's like 98 degrees. But in the spiritual world, something magical just happened. And Nesivos Shalom describes what happens. Listen to this. It's so beautiful. It's so magical. The Nesivos Shalom says that picture, if you can, in your hand, you have a seed. A seed. What's it worth? An apple seed. Nothing. It's a seed. But it's something. You can touch it. You can feel it. It feels hard. It's a seed. Now imagine you have it in your hand. You have something. It's not much, but it's something. Imagine you drop it. I think I dramatize it more than the rabbi does, just letting you know. All the dramatizations, whatever doesn't work is my fault. He's just cuts to when you cut to the core and the good stuff, it's all the rabbi. Just giving you. Imagine you have and it falls out of your hand, and it falls into the ground, and now that seed is buried in soil. Now, if you'd have a camera in the soil, you would see something that shocks you. You would see that the seed starts to come apart. And slowly the seed starts to come apart until the shell falls off. And if you're looking at that seed, at that moment in time, you would say, I lost something. A second ago, I had a seed and now it's gone. At least I had something. It wasn't much, but it was something. And now it's gone. The shell fell off. And if you were staring at that seed at that moment under the ground, at that second that you would look at that seed, when the shell fell off, you would say to yourself, now I lost something. But you don't realize that what that seed was doing, the shell was holding back what he calls the kusta dichiyusa, the essential energy of the potential of a tree. When the shell fell, you didn't lose something, you gained everything. Because the shell was holding back something so much greater than a shell. It was holding back the energy, the potential of something so much greater than the shell. It's not going to recreate itself. It's going to build a tree with hundreds and thousands of fruits. That shell was holding back the essence of something so much greater than the shell. So at the moment where it fell away, you didn't lose, you gained. And that moment, if you'll be watching or Nava, we'll probably talk about it. That moment is called chatzos, where each year we're supposed to bring the Beis Hamikdash. And each year we have high hopes that this is going to be the year. In fact, my rabbi was talking about it last week, Rav Moshe Weinberger. He said back in the old days, which he probably means just 40 years ago, not a million years ago, just 30, 40 years ago. He said that they would have the kinos. I remember this as a kid growing up. And some of you may remember this much more vividly than me, but I remember as a kid growing up trying to find kinos and never being able to find it because it was in that paper packet. You know what I'm talking about? Where you couldn't find where anybody was up to, and there was no spaces. And it was in a paper thing. And then they taught it to leather bound, and now you probably can find it in silver and English and all the good stuff. So my rabbi was saying in the old days, they kept it papered. You know why? Because every year they threw it into Shemus. Who wants Tisha B'Av again? When Tisha B'Av was done, when you were done with Kinos, you threw it into Shemus. You buried it. It was it's over. We're not going to do this next year. Are you kidding me? The Beis Hamikdash is coming in. I'm not buying it leather. You're joking. I'm a Jew. There's no investment on that. If I buy there in leather, now I want it to come back every year because I got my name on it. I don't want my name on it. I want it to be the paper one. I'm going to chuck it. Every year, we're thinking, we're not having Tisha B'Av, it's going to be a moed. We're going to be dancing. And then Nisan, which is the year of the month of Geula, turns into Iyar Sivan. Tammuz comes and you're like, oh, it's Tammuz. Oh no, I hope we get it before the 3 weeks. I hope we don't have to do Shiva Asar Tammuz. And then the 3 weeks come and then the 9 days and you're like, no, it's Tisha B'Av. And you sit on that floor and it hits you. It's not coming this year. It's not coming. The seed, the tree boils down to a little seed. All you have left in your hand is a seed. It's not worth anything. And you're sitting on the floor and the seed drops. And as you sit on that floor on Tisha B'Av night, even the shell falls away. And just when you thought it was all over, you stand up at chatzos. Because just when the seed falls away, it reveals the potential for the next year. Now you have everything. And he calls this the Rosh Hashanah of Rosh Hashanah. The whole year in its potential takes place at that moment where you stand up. Now you turn another corner. And my friend was struggling with something. In 2 years, I sent him this mimer. And I said to him, whenever you have a challenge, you can choose. Do you see the shell, or do you see the life force behind the shell? Because that's what challenge is. Challenge is when Hashem shakes the shell. But sometimes Hashem shakes the shell so that he can reveal a greater potential underneath it. And some people, all they see is the shell. And as the shell falls away, it all goes. He was telling me, if you're going to look at this crisis, if you're going to look at COVID, and all you're going to see is the surface of COVID, you're never going to get through it. You have to see the potential. You got to see what it's going to unveil, what it's going to create, what it's going to bring to the world. Because whenever a shell starts to shake, there's the shell or there's the inside potential, depending on your perspective. And you saw it and you see it. Some people, all they wanted was to go back to normal. And others wanted to go forward to greatness. And they're really different. There are people that only see shells. And there are those that see what's on the inside. You're both looking at the same thing, but the eyes are different. One person has physical eyes, one person has spiritual eyes. One sees a shell, and one sees the kusta dichiusa that's right beneath it, ready to come forth. That's Tisha B'Av. That's why it's called a moed, because God goes, do not get lost in the shell. There's a lot of power in these weeks. A lot of power in this day. There's a lot of potential. The beginning of your whole year is taking place literally in a day that most people think is a day that just is a throwaway. Can't wait for it to be over. In life, we choose what to look at. The shell or the life force. That's a choice. You want to know what Tisha B'Av is about? Listen to this. Why did Moshe, you ever wonder, why did Moshe tell the Jews to look for fortified cities? He set them up, no? He set them up. Fortified cities are scary. Moshe tells the Jews, go in there and look for fortified cities. They look for fortified cities and go, we're going to die. Moshe's like, I can't believe you said that. They're like, what do you mean? You told us to look for fortified cities. We found them. They're scary. They're massive. You know how big these things are? Can you imagine using a sword against the kotel? Can you imagine? Just think for a second, going to the kotel and fighting a war with people standing on top and you're on the bottom with a sword. You got no shot. What are you talking about? Because Moshe is looking for something. Moshe tells them to look for fortified cities because what fortified cities have. The Sforno says something amazing. Listen to this beautiful Sforno. It says, Imhem yoshvim kiprazos levetach b'lib shum yiras milchama. You know what I'm worried about, Moshe says? I'm worried about the mentality. When Klal Yisroel came out, remember, Klal Yisrael came out, they didn't leave in the middle of the night. Hashem went up toe-to-toe against the strongest man in the world, Paro. He went 10 rounds, and then he wasn't even done. Then he walked them out, split a sea. When God split the sea, the whole world knew. Every day we say in Az Yashir, Az nivhalu alufei Edom, Elei Moad, Yochose Morad, the alufei Edom, the generals of Edom, the chieftains of all of the nations, they knew about it. They saw that we walked through a sea. They were shaking. When Yoshua sent in spies to Rachav, do you remember? The spies asked her one question. You guys up for it? She's like, we're all melting. That was 39 years later. Moshe didn't care about whether there was like a fortified city. Moshe's like, God will figure it out. We want to know if the people are going to fight us or not. Because if the people know that God runs this world and they're scared, we got this. Moshe says, go look for fortified cities. You know why? Because if you see fortified cities, it means that they're scared. People that are scared stand behind walls. If you're walking down the street, you see some guy walk into his house and have 30 locks, and the other guys are all hanging on the street corner. I can tell you one thing. I'm from Canarsie. Don't mess with the guys in the street corner. The people that have between 20 locks, those guys aren't as brave. Moshe goes, if they're all behind cities, you know what that means? If they all go to bed at night and have to lock themselves behind doors, you know what that means? That they're scared. That's a good thing. When Moshe sees fortified cities, you know what he sees? That's awesome. Their hearts understand that God runs this world. We got this. When the spies see fortified cities, you know what they see? The shell. It's hard. We're going to lose. Two people. Same thing. One sees the shell. One sees the life force. The story of Tisha B'Av isn't the story of a bunch of people that went to Israel and got scared. The story of Tisha B'Av is how destruction happens for the rest of generations. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, if you keep on looking at shells, if you live too much with physical eyes, you're never going to become the nation you're meant to be. I'm not going to take it from you. You're going to take it from you. The story of Tisha B'Av is the story of spiritual eyes. Reminds us wherever we are in life, the Kadosh Baruch Hu demands of us to see the life force, to see the hope, to see the greatness in each other. I'm sure you all know the story of Thomas Edison. Everybody knows, I'm sure knows that story. Even if it may be half true, it doesn't matter. It's awesome. The story of Thomas Edison is that when he was a little kid, they sent him home with a note attached to his bag. And the note said, your son isn't smart enough for us to teach him, so we are expelling him. He is too dumb for this school. Can you imagine a little boy comes home with a little note attached to him? Your son is too dumb for this school. He's expelled. And his little Thomas Edison turns to his mommy and says, what does it say, mommy? And Mrs. Edison says, it says that you are too smart for the school and they want me to be able to teach you. And so that's what she does. In fact, Thomas Edison was homeschooled for most of his life. After his mother died, he was cleaning out her desk after he was Thomas Edison. And he sees a note from the school as a little kid. You're too dumb. Thomas Edison writes about his mother. This is what he said, this quote from Thomas, listen to this. He says, my mother was the making of me. She was so true, so sure of me, that I felt I had someone to live for. Mrs. Edison saw the life force, not the shell. There are so many people in this world who all people see is their shells. There are so many people sitting in classrooms and all anybody sees is their shells. They don't fit into the box. There are people living in homes and they're not as good as their siblings, but nobody sees their life force. No one sees their soul. They see their shell. Husbands and wives. We live in a world where we're trained to see shells. I was talking to someone recently and he was sharing his struggles with me. And in the middle of saying something, he said to me, and it's not supposed to be that way. And I said, what? How do you know what it's supposed to be? He goes, I see what my friends have. I said, how do you see what your friends have? Because it's all over Instagram. I'm like, you're looking at Instagram and you're judging other people by Instagram? Are you kidding me? Those kids don't smile. Mom had to threaten them with their lives till she got 18 pictures and she picked the best one and then she filtered it. That's not the real kids. Half the time, those are fake kids that they hire for the picture on vacation. No kids listen. No one, wait, you're joking me. We live in a world of the shell. How you look, what it says on that resume, how you appear to others. The shell. How many times somebody whispers to you, it doesn't matter. It matters what they think. How that just gets at you. We live in a world in which the shell is dominating, in which we even make the shell frum now. And now we like dress up the shell so that we pretend you're frummer with the shell. And the whole essence of Tisha B'Av, Banias Daiti, is being able to see past the shell. Being able to see the kusta de being able to see that kid in a classroom and know that kid's got a lot of potential. Being able to see people for who they are. Being able to see the godless in somebody that doesn't appear on a piece of paper. What does that do with being a shadchan? So I want to tell you it has everything to do with being a shadchan. I believe that what you're doing is maybe the most important thing that's happening today in Klal Yisrael. You can't go 5 minutes without somebody speaking about Shidduchim. Shidduchim is the world of the Panemius. Shidduchim is all about connecting somebody's soul to someone's soul. The whole game of Shidduchim is just the Panemius. It's just the inside of the shell. These are people that are destined for each other before they were even brought into this world. This is the work of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. The Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't get lost in shells. The Eibishter is Meshadech Shidduchim all day. Shidduchim is the work of the inner core. But we're living in a world of the outer core. So who's going to bridge the gap? So I'd like to propose that what you all do every day when you're involved in Shidduchim is you do not make Shidduchim. I'd like to suggest that your talent is not to make a Shidduch. That's not your job. That's God's job. Your talent is not in what you say. Your talent is in what you see. Your job is to be a chozeh, to be a seer. Your job is to be able to look at somebody and see beneath the resume, beneath the outer core. When you connect to somebody and you look at them for not their shell, but for their inside, you may be the first person that's not related to them to do that. There may never have been somebody that looked at them for more than their shell until you. They may be judged on their shell since they were born. They may be preparing the most beautiful shell to go out and find another shell their entire lives, thinking that that's the way it works. What you can do is you can look at somebody and see beneath the surface. You can talk to somebody and find something inside them and see godless where they didn't even see it themselves. And just by seeing the godless in somebody else, you may be unleashing a part of them that would never have come to the surface but for you. Thomas Edison would never have been Thomas Edison if his mother didn't see behind the shell. And every day there are hundreds of kids that would not have been successful in life but for the spiritual eyes of a parent or a teacher or a Rebbe seeing beneath the shell. You're not making a shidduch. You are empowering an individual to see something in themselves. And every time you do that, you can be changing their lives in ways that you can't dream of, regardless of whether this particular situation ends up becoming a marriage or not. That means every day you're making somebody greater. And every conversation that you have with someone, when you look past the shell and the resume, you are giving them a breath of life that they may never have gotten before, because they're in a really scary world. And you're aligned to what they're looking for. We're living in a world where we're up against Tisha B'Av right now. And Tisha B'Av is the time in which we looked too physical. You may be the one that brick by brick is bringing the Geula. But every day looking at another Jew, not getting lost in the resume, digging deeper till you see the kusta de chiyusa in each person. Every day, every Jew. Just by being able to connect to them, you're bringing out a piece of their inner life force. And whether or not this particular connection is the one that makes it, I believe that's the Eibishter's business. You do your best. And if every time you speak to somebody, you're searching for a layer beneath the shell, you don't have any idea how many lives you're changing. I'll end with this. I know my time is running out. Give me 2 more minutes. I've been speaking about this concept for a little bit. I'll share with you one quick story. There's a shadchan that came with me. She may be on the call right now. I don't know. I don't see everyone's faces. She may be here. So if she's here, I apologize if it's you without asking your permission. There's a shadchan that I saw at some program somewhere once. I'll try to keep it nice and vague. I saw her one time in this world. So she's a Jew. How about that? So you just gotta, that's as much as we're gonna go with. She's Jewish and she's a woman. Those are the 2 clues. So we were talking once about seeing beneath the shell. She told me this incredible story about this girl who had a very difficult upbringing. It didn't, whatever with her mom, it's not for now. It wasn't her fault. She didn't choose to be born to. Whatever happened to her mom was, as they say, nicht pashut. But this girl's wonderful, wonderful. But apparently that was like a ding on her resume. Apparently if your parents aren't perfect, it dings your resume, but she didn't do anything wrong. She didn't choose to be born to, she didn't choose that part of her life. She's doing everything possible, but what are you going to do? The resume wasn't perfect. So she was struggling. So for whatever reason, they were both in the same Shabbaton once. They were in some Shabbos program somewhere. And the father explains to the shadchan what her daughter is going through. And she's a wonderful girl, but she's struggling because of this situation with her mom and the shadchan feels for her. So the shadchan sits with her and meets with her. And she looks beneath her shell. And she sees a princess. Not with the perfect upbringing. She didn't have it easy. And to the world, maybe that means that there's a problem, but she took the time to see behind the resume, behind the shell, and she sees a princess. So this shadchan's telling me the story. She starts to set her up, but it's not going great. People look in, they see the issue, whatever. She has this one family who she's close to. They have this wonderful boy, and she reads to the boy, and the parents are like, no. She goes, listen to me. Stop judging on the surface. Just give this girl a chance. Now, she goes, for me, one date. So the family relents. She's telling me the story. And they send their Prince Charming out with this girl. And Prince Charming likes her. So the parents are getting nervous. They call the shadchan. She vouches for her. They get married. She doesn't hear from the family again. 10 years later, which was the week before me and her are talking, 10 years later, she is telling me the story. It happened last week, but it was 10 years since the shidduch. She sees this mother in the supermarket, which is where I guess all the goods go down, from what I understand. And she's running to get a couple more things for Shabbos, and she turns a corner and she sees somebody, and they knew each other. They just lost touch. And the lady comes right at her. She goes, I want to talk to you. And her first thought was, oh my gosh, the shidduch. And lady lunges for her. And in her mind, she's like, oh my gosh, this is like, oh my, she's going to assault me in a supermarket? And this lady hugs her and starts to cry. She goes, my tatala is always a good boy. He just became the head of some hush of a meisid. He's this big Talmid Chacham. And the mother says, I know my son. He is the man he is today because of that girl you gave me. My daughter-in-law made my son. If it wasn't for her, and I love my son, but my son isn't this boy. Thank you for pushing me. It's the greatest gift you've ever given me was my daughter-in-law. We don't know. You don't know what you're doing. You're changing the world. But what you're doing more than anything is you're convincing people to look beneath the shell. And that's the greatest gift you can give somebody. The greatest gift you can give somebody is to give them spiritual eyes. And when we have our own spiritual eyes in every situation and see the godless in each person, then we get the clues for who connects to who from underneath the shell. When we can live our lives constantly clearing our lenses to see that everything the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us. I forgot one piece. I almost forgot this. You know why the Kadosh Baruch Hu had everybody dying in Eretz Yisrael? Because if back then they didn't have like cities, they had small little towns. You know what happens if 12 Jews roll into a small town? They'd stick out. Can you imagine like having 12 Jews roll into some bungalow colony? Everyone's like, who are you? Imagine it over there. They didn't have like cities. But if there's a funeral in town, there are guests all the time. Kadosh Baruch Hu made each town that they went to somebody dying because he was protecting them. But they couldn't see beneath the surface. You know, the Arizal says that Tammuz and Av are connected to the body parts of the two eyes. That's what we're fixing, our eyes. My bracha is that you should lead us. You should lead us. Do not for a second take your job lightly. Do not for a second think that what you do is stam. You're building the future of Klal Yisrael. And you're doing it with the mechanism of Geula. And if all of us together start to see the world with spiritual eyes, and that's how we see the people in front of us, we'll see the greatness in them. They'll see the greatness in themselves. And hopefully we'll be able to show each other and everyone around them just what happens when you see beneath the shell, just how awesome life can be when you live beneath the shell. My bracha to each of you today, you should be zocheh to be stronger, never relent, never give up. Always look deeper and always know that no matter what you're doing, when you look deeper into somebody else, you're changing their lives no matter what happens. And if each of us do this each and every day, maybe we'll be zocheh for the Kadosh Baruch to look down and say, look at my kids, they get it, they're living in a world that is one big shell. There's never been another shell than the shell they're living in. And in this world of the shell, look at these Jews trying to see beneath it to the kusa d'chiusa. You know what? Maybe we'll be zocheh because of your efforts. The Kadosh Baruch Hu will say, enough is enough. I'll show you what's really going on beneath the scenes. And bring us to a time where he'll make all the shidduchim with Mashiach Sidkenu. May he come soon in our days. B'mheira b'yameinu amen.
Thank you so much, Charlie. So penetrating, so moving, so inspirational. Every shidduch suggestion counts. Tonight's inspiration should be an Aliyas Neshama for Yisroel ben Yeshayahu Halevi and Elisheva Basya Bas Yechiel Ephraim. Please have Yisroel and Elisheva in mind when making a shidduch suggestion. So often, the best shidduch ideas come not from the professional shadchanim, but just from a family member, a friend, a neighbor. Baruch Hashem, like I said before, I had the schus of making many shidduchim. And earlier today, I was just reflecting as to who the people that I made shidduchim for. And one of them was my son's friend. One of them lived on my block. Two of them I daven with in shul. One of them fills up the vending machine where I work. Two of them are relatives. One of them is my secretary's daughter. All people that I associate with. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't put us on our block, in our home, for us, because, we have a beautiful living room, dining room. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us in our house because we should get to know our neighbors. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the job that we have so that we should get to know the people that we work with. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us in the shul so we get to know the people that we daven with. Because at the end of the day, our tafkid, our purpose is to benefit and to help the next person. And I ask all of you to visit 10kbatayyisroel.org to log your suggestions and be included in the count. And please sign up for our email updates and join our WhatsApp group to keep abreast of events, resources, milestones, incentives, and so much more. Again, thank you, Charlie. Thank you all for logging on and listening. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us all Siyata DiShmaya, and may we all be dancing at each other's simchas b'karov. Have a good night.